Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Business and Life Stories with James and Mike. Our guest returning with us for the second time, Richard Lee Ty, one of the youngest TED speakers ever. I didn't say TEDx, I said TED. He knows what he's talking about. He created this fascinating company called Excuses to Connect, which we talked all about in our last episode. There's a link below for you guys to go listen to that. Welcome back, sir, Richard.
Well, thank you for inviting me back for the second time.
Thanks for coming back, man.
So today we're going to talk a bit about communication and how that can improve or unimprove our mental health depending how we do it. And also I wanted to ask, you have posted on LinkedIn several times now about you're looking for people that want to be TED speakers, and this is part of the coaching that you do. So which of those two topics should we start with? I'm not really sure. Do you want to go into the mental health part first, or get into the TED stage first?
How about we talk about the TED stage first, and then we can get into mental health. So I recently decided I have an ambitious goal for the next 12 months where I'd like to help 10 thought leaders become TEDx speakers. And really my motivation behind this is I've had quite a transformative experience becoming a TEDx speaker, because it helped to clarify to me that really the core message I'd like to keep sharing with the world, and that's so important to me, is around connection. Just because, as we talked about last time, there's just not enough awareness around it, and there's still a lot of stigma that's surrounding loneliness, and I'd like to be able to change that so people know it's okay to be lonely. Actually, lots of people experience it, and then here's what you can do to improve your social confidence and feel more connected in your life. And so, having presented my idea, I know there's so many other wonderful ideas out there as well that the world should hear. Every time I watch a TED Talk or TEDx talk, I leave with new insights and new things that I can apply. And I feel like everyone has their own story and unique insight to share in the TEDx stage as well. And so that whole aspect of mentoring someone through that whole process, I think, is very rewarding for me, but also fulfills my sort of wish to impact the world more. So yeah, it's an exciting new venture. When I posted about it earlier this week, I've gotten lots of interest, and then we'll see who gets on the TEDx stage in the next 12 months that I've helped get there. Because I think the other main thing too is a lot of people don't know what the process is like, and it's mysterious to them. So that's another way I can support them.
Hey, can I jump in here? Okay. Right. I would just like to, maybe this is my inquisitive mind, but why should someone do a TED talk or a TEDx talk? Like, hey, we're just happy, we're just cruising on, we're building our business. Like, the last thing which I want to do is spend X number of hours or tens or hundreds of hours and then get up in front of hundreds or thousands of people and go through that whole process and that whole journey. I mean, like, hey, great, you know, it's like, I love listening to these speakers, but I guess if someone's thinking, well, how's it going to transform my life? Like, why should I go through that process?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Having talked with a number of people now, there are really different motivations for each individual. For some people, this is something that they've dreamed of for a long time. It's been on their bucket list that one day I want to be on stage. And so for those people, obviously there's a very strong motivation, like, I've always wanted to do this, and now might be an opportunity to. For other people, it's sort of more motivated from this place of service and impact, where they've gone through some personal transformation, or they feel like they have some important lesson that they'd like to share with the world, so hopefully it can benefit more people. That was certainly one of my motivations, again, around this connection loneliness piece, where it's just not being talked about enough. I think another thing too is certainly there's lots of other public speaking opportunities out there, but I think there's some level of TED and TEDx being very well known around the world. For example, their YouTube channel right now, the TEDx YouTube channel, has 36 million subscribers, which is a lot. I can just see both of
Wow.
you shaking your heads. So it's something that's very well known, and I think that's also a large perhaps incentive for people. It's like, this is a stage where I can build my own authority and credibility and share my message with lots of people, which can lead to more speaking opportunities, clients, etc. But really, I did want to also focus back on the tagline for TED, which is ideas worth spreading. Really, the whole platform is about creating this opportunity to share ideas that can impact the world. And when you watch it, you feel like, oh, I have to share this with my friend because there's this great insight or something I've learned here. And so, yeah, there's a number of motivations for why someone might want to be on that TEDx stage, but also completely understandable if that's not someone's thing. Because I know public speaking can be a huge fear for a lot of people too. And telling someone you're going to be on stage talking to hundreds of people and then viewed by millions of people on YouTube, I think that would frighten some people so much that like there's no way they would do it, even if they were paid to do it.
It's the excitement of public speaking for me. Once something left my mouth, I can't get it back. And since it's now been broadcast and recorded, it's out there.
Yes.
Yeah, that's always a bit nerve-wracking. Do you find many people wanting to speak at TED and TEDx who are super nervous about that aspect of it, or are they just super excited about their idea and not too worried about the mechanics of doing it?
Again, I do think it's a very individual thing, because even for me, I feel fairly confident with public speaking, but I also got nervous on the day of. And I think it's just normal, because nerves are sort of a sign that this is something that's important, and it's your body and your hormones gearing up. It's like, it's not like a battle. It's not like a fight, but it's like, it still triggers that same sort of response within you, like just preparing you with the right energy and, to prepare for something that's really important to you. The thing I've learned around nerves and public speaking, though, it's something that can be practiced, where even the most accomplished and successful speakers, they still feel nervous. It just doesn't affect them in a negative way when it comes to presenting their idea on stage. They can actually harness that energy to, bring more enthusiasm and passion to when they're connecting with the audience. So, yeah, I've talked to some people who are nervous and excitement. I think it's just sort of two sides of the same coin. It's just sort of how you frame it and use up that energy. So certainly I've talked to people that, feel very nervous, but I would say they can harness that as well.
So if someone wants to take up this offer you've given on LinkedIn, is LinkedIn the best way to reach you?
I put out this offer on all the platforms that I'm on, so including on Instagram and Facebook as well. So any of those channels, you can certainly reach out to me. I love connecting with people, obviously, so happy to chat with anyone that's interested as well.
So I hope everybody listening to this, take a step. If you think you got an idea worth spreading, because every single person on this planet has something inside them that's unique.
Mm-hmm.
We want that to come out on the TED platform in front of 36 million people and counting. Richard's the guy to see. Now, I know we wanted to delve into mental health and communication. As still a recovering engineer and full-time investing guy, I can't say mental health is my strong suit. So I'm going to turn it over to you two at this point.
I think we can all agree that starting and there's a certain amount of stress with a startup at an early stage, and it can be a lonely journey. And maybe obviously there's a lot more communication platforms than in the past, but ironically, some figures seem to show that loneliness is increasing, even though the platforms and the ability to communicate has increased exponentially in the last 5 over 10 years. What's your take on that, Richard? Like since I sort of made that connection a few years ago, it doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah, I think that is the interesting paradox of our digital age, because in some aspects, as you've mentioned, we are more connected than we've ever been because there's just so many platforms through social media and Zoom and us doing podcasting right now that you can connect with people all around the world. And at the same time, people are more disconnected than they've ever been. I think it comes down to what is the quality or depth of the interaction or connection that you're actually making. Um, it's interesting. I put out this poll on my Instagram before to ask about how what are people's relationship to social media, and most of the responses were negative in the sense that meant in terms of their mental health, social media causes a lot of comparison where you see, oh, my friend is going on this amazing trip, or they had this amazing food, or they had this achievement in their life. And there's a lot of comparison that's going on, like, well, oh, it looks like they got everything figured out. My life sucks. I don't have that. I feel like I'm left out. And it's tricky because I think people do curate like the highlights and post the best parts of their life on social media, and they're not really, sharing about the times that are really difficult and so on. So it's very easy to see things in sort of a vacuum where it seems like everyone's life is so much better than my own, and that leads to a lot of isolation. So it's something to be aware of, because I think it's a double-edged sword when it comes to how connected we are through technology nowadays, and whether we're intentionally using it in a way that's beneficial for our health, or sort of falling into the trap of comparison and these negative effects on our mental health potentially.
I've often wondered whether I would start like a channel or something putting all the bad things which happened. I woke up with a headache. I had an argument with ABC. I missed out on closing a deal. My dog went off for an hour and a half. It was like, I mean, I guess, has social media, have you rattled the chain for it to be a kind of a glory reel? Or because I mean, Mike, we're obviously a slightly older generation here, but I don't recall,
you are.
Yeah, but I don't recall like 25, 30 years ago kind of necessarily going in and maybe having a round of drinks with friends and going, hey, guess what? Like just doing the glory reel, which maybe social media is a platform for now. Equally so, I don't necessarily think people have in general gone and talked about the harder stuff in their life either. But have you done any research, or have you pondered on the fact of that? Have humans always, I mean, some people have always wanted to show off, right? Absolutely. But I think you're right. I think there's something about social media where we only want to put the best pictures, or we put up a picture of a sunset, but we never put a cloudy day. I mean, I mean, what is it about this?
I think fundamentally, as a human need, we need belongingness and connection. We want to be seen, heard, and valued. But the mechanism for how we feel that sort of validation and feeling belonging, I guess, depends on which age we're in. Because in the past, I suppose, before the age of social media, which is before I was born, I do wonder if people got that sense of being seen and heard just through face-to-face conversations. But nowadays, because there's this mechanism, I guess, for better, where social media is designed around likes and comments and these other metrics, that perhaps that's how people are seeking that validation nowadays, where by posting all these cool things in their life, they're looking to get that sense of feeling good and feeling validated because other people are recognizing it. But it's a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope because if someone's so externally dependent on this validation, then you sort of just these bursts, like you get these hits of dopamine and then it's gone again, and then you're sort of seeking it. Whereas I guess consistent happiness or an attitude of happiness comes more from internal. It's interesting. I participated in this guided meditation once, and the facilitator asked us all this question of what's something you've always wanted to hear from someone, like hear someone say it to you, and you've never heard it before. And for me, I think my thought was along the lines of, Richard, you're good enough. I'm proud of you. Like those sort of things. I've never really directly heard it from someone. And then the facilitator sort of turned it on its head, where it's like, you can tell that to yourself. Like whatever phrase or thought that was in your mind that you've always wanted to hear from someone else, you can say that to yourself. Something just clicked in my mind at that moment. It's like, oh, you're right. I don't have to keep desperately searching for this and waiting for someone to say this to me. I can just say it to myself. And that was very empowering because it's the first time I really recognized like, oh, like there's really important relationship to build with myself as well in terms of how my internal dialogue is. How do I talk to myself? And once I realized like that thing that I've been looking for, like that validation or that phrase I really wanted to hear, I can offer that to myself. And so it's like self-acceptance, self-validation. And that can be powerful because then it sort of takes you away from the distractions or trap, perhaps, of people trying to seek that validation elsewhere, such as through social media.
Yeah, I think it obviously does come from internal place, a sense of contentment and being present. I think that's really interesting, isn't it? How, in other words, you've sort of tipped the whole social media as a place to validate, show off, stroke, validate. But the point you touched on was it's actually breeds insecurity, right? In like both ways, right? Because what we started off was saying was that the general statement that no one wants to hang out there dirty washing, right? So it's always like happy days with the kids, or a great trip, or a lovely day on a holiday, or like whatever it is, right? Or a new car, or like whatever it is. And then how we started was the idea that maybe makes the people who are seeing that post feel less of themselves because maybe just for whatever reason. But what you've actually mentioned there is you kind of tipped that on your head. Like people are only posting that stuff because they're insecure about themselves. And so they need the validation of people going, oh yeah, it was lovely to see you having a lovely holiday, or so it's kind of like, it almost sounds like social media from some perspective is kind of like kind of twisting the wheel. It's kind of accelerating that vicious circle, right? Like on the surface, it's the poster or the postee rather, the people reading the post who are feeling bad. But what you're actually saying, and what seems blatantly clear now, is maybe to the same extent or even more, it's the person posting which needs to post to feel validated because they're getting insecure about themselves.
Yeah, I did want to clarify a point there where I recognize this is nothing's absolute. Like, I'm not saying that every single person who uses social media is because they're insecure or and so on. But yeah, I definitely think that's a factor, and it's so much. We live in such a subjective world. Everything's filtered through our own personal biases and experiences. Because for one person, it might be the case that they're using social media as a way to seek validation, and for another person, it might be it's completely from the perspective of service, that they're wanting to share their positive message that can impact and spread to lots of people. Case in point, I mean, you had noticed that I had posted about wanting to help people with becoming a TEDx speaker. So it's coming from this place of like, well, I want to help people, and social media is the platform or tool to share that sort of opportunity to more people. So in a way, social media is neutral, and it depends on the user and how they choose to use it.
So I guess if we segue back to the mental health and communication, although, yeah, technology is neutral, and it's definitely how it's used and how it's filtered through all our own internal filters. But there are better, there are, like, face-to-face will always be a better and more substantial form of communication. If we are feeling like I guess the two parts of the question is, how can social media be used, or how can the technology platforms be used in a positive way for those really maybe stuck in this sort of a chasm of loneliness, or feeling that they're the only startup which might not be going well, or like wherever they feel stuck. So how can they, or have you come across any platforms or any techniques, or how can the technology behind social media be used in a positive way in that perspective?
Yes, there are definitely opportunities and communities that are out there, because I do agree that there's something different when it comes to face-to-face in-person communication. But I think there's also something different with online communication too, because there's no borders, there's no boundaries in terms of who you can connect with. And just for example, there's numbers of Facebook groups. Probably a Facebook group exists for any possible niche interest or even broad interest that you might have. Like, for example, I'm in a group right now about board game designers, because at one point I'm like, I want to design a board game. So it's just a whole community around that topic, or for public speakers, or for foodies in my city, and so on. And so I think there's quite an opportunity online to find interest groups or communities that you might not otherwise have access to, whether for like physical restrictions, or, there's just not that whole gathering of people together, but you can have thousands of people in a Facebook group on that same topic. Same with entrepreneurship too. Like, there's lots of online entrepreneurial resources that one can access. And so I think in that way, technology can be used for good if you're clear on what it is that you're looking for, and then take intentional action to find those types of people that align with you. I think the other thing too, like, social media makes things very accessible in a way, because if there's someone I'm interested in talking to, or they post interesting content and I'd like to connect with them, I just shoot them a message. Sometimes they reply, sometimes they don't reply, but it's like, even someone with tens of thousands of followers, it doesn't mean that I can't access them. And perhaps in a traditional world, in the face-to-face world, like, if they're a celebrity or someone that's well known, like, I actually have to physically go to their event or wherever they're at to actually connect with them. Whereas there's quite a lot of ways to engage and interact with people online through commenting on their posts, retweeting, etc. So yeah, those are some ways it can be used for good. I will mention a specific platform that I had been on for a while as well. It's called Lunch Club. So the website is lunchclub.com. What it does is it pairs people up for conversations every single week based on your interests. So when you create your profile, you can write, I'm interested in entrepreneurship, I'm interested in venture capital, etc., like whatever it is. And then their AI does magic. I mean, I don't know much about technology, but their AI does magic to pair you up with someone that shares those similar interests. And then it sets up a room and time for you to chat. And so I've met all sorts of wonderful, interesting people through that as well. And again, like, the platform is designed for these intentional connections. It's not like people are meeting there just to like pitch to one another about my service and business. It's just having a genuine conversation. It's interesting, actually. I once got on a call and the lady introduced herself as, I'm a vice president at Adidas, like the and I'm like, hi. I mean, I was in a bit of shock. I'm like, wow, I'm talking to someone, I guess, that's very high up in this company. But we just had a chill, casual conversation because she just wanted to connect with more people. And so again, in a way, technology, I think, does democratize and equalize access to some extent for people. So I think those are some of the benefits of technology.
Because last time we talked about how in real life, in external life, if we are feeling a bit lonely, you talked about very practical steps about maybe sort of breaking down, like if hypothetically going on a date is too scary for someone, then you can go on like with groups of people, or you can just speak to neutral people such as a cashier or someone, or just start that. So sort of baby steps within the real world. I guess it, and what we're covering here is we've kind of circled back to the positive aspects of technology. But what happens if people are still caught in that kind of feeling nervous about it, or maybe I'm not going to make time for it? Have you come across, or have you heard of, or have you developed any tips or any baby steps for people to be able to, because everything's a matter of confidence, right? I mean, like ultimately to join the lunch club, you have to be confident enough to go through the process of signing up, and then you have to deliberately kind of schedule an hour or whatever it is out of your days. And it's so easy, if we're caught in a bit of a trap, to make an excuse. Hey, I'm too busy. So the circle goes round and round, and we get more lonely, and we get trapped in work. We get more lonely, and we get trapped in work. So have you found any ways maybe of breaking that within the online world, like any kind of baby steps, perhaps, where we can just break out of our patterns of maybe loneliness or mental health issues to actually head towards having that weekly conversation with really interesting people?
Yeah, this is a really good question. It's interesting. I asked a similar question to one of my guests on my podcast show, so I'll briefly mention it. The person I was interviewing, her name's Dr. Julianne Holt-Lundstad. And so she does research specifically on the effects of loneliness on our mental and physical health. And there's a statistic that she came up with that's widely shared around, which is the effects of loneliness is equivalent to smoking a pack of 15 cigarettes a day, like in terms of how it relates to our mortality and the effect on that. And so her research really shows like it's a very pressing thing that people should pay attention to, because it has tangible effects on, you know, how long we live and the quality of our health. And so the question I asked her is like, okay, I understand that, of course, loneliness is a huge issue, but so is people not exercising, right? Lots of people, I think, intellectually know that exercise is good for you. It's important to stay active, yet lots of people don't do it, where it's like, you know, they buy a gym membership for their New Year's resolution, and then by the end of January, they're like, I'm done. We're not going anymore, even though people know it's important. So I asked her that type of question, like, okay, so loneliness we know is a huge issue, but there's still some people that don't necessarily take action on it. What do we do? Her response to me was similar to comparing it to exercise, where it's sort of finding what is the type of exercise that will work well for you. Because for some people, they're runners. They love doing, you know, going for running. Other people like climbing, swimming. Like, find whatever it is, that form of physical activity that works in the context of your life and that feels enjoyable and motivating for you to do. And the same goes with this aspect of social health, in terms of, you know, find the type of activity that will work in the context of you making connections. Because for some people, let's say they love reading, so perhaps a book club might be the best context for you to connect with other people, or doing some sort of activity, or making food together, or going to some certain event. So I guess that's what I would encourage people to do. It's like, find whatever type of activity, social activity, works for you, because some activities just won't work for some people. If, like, for me, for example, like to be at a place of really crowded people, it's tightly packed, like at a club or whatever, that is not my ideal place for connection, because I just like one-on-one conversations, and that's what I prefer and try to seek out. And so I guess for people that might feel trapped with this, is find whatever activity, and there might be some exploration here, but some activity that works best for you in terms of your other, you know, life commitments with work or family and so on, and that fits with your schedule. And in some ways too, I think technology can make those baby steps even easier. In some ways you can reach, as I was mentioning before, like are some ways that it might be easier to connect online than in person. And I mean, especially over COVID too, when you couldn't connect with people in person. So yeah, those are some thoughts I would offer.
Because really that is almost equivalent to finding going on a date too scary. So you go out with a group of friends kind of thing, right? And so if a one-to-one in lunch club with a high-powered CEO is a little bit like too much for you, then you could join a forum or a group about an interest. So it's like so what I see there is a commonality of kind of which obviously doesn't work for everyone, but the commonality of kind of one-to-one interaction for a lot of people is I'll coin the phrase stressful, but it's more intense than going out in a diffused group, right? And that's kind of a similar thing I'm hearing here, like joining maybe a forum about reading horror books and just comparing books and sort of getting used to typing and putting your comments and hearing people's comments back in what's the phrase? A supportive environment. It is going to be a very positive step towards having like a one-to-one in lunch club, which might segue into being able to do sales, which might segue into being able to do a TED talk, etc., etc. Whereas there's not too many people who may be feeling a bit sensitive and then are suddenly able to take the giant step to speaking in front of 36 million people, right? So.
Yeah, definitely. I think what you're bringing up here does tie back with introversion and extroversion as well. And more fundamentally, it's like, what are your connection preferences? Because for me as an introvert, I tend to prefer one-on-one interactions with people. I don't find it necessarily more stressful. It's actually more meaningful for me because then I can actually get to a deeper conversation, get to know that person better, and so on. There's someone I interviewed on my podcast before who is definitely an extrovert because I asked him, like, describe your ideal day to me. And he's like, I want to wake up in a house full of people of my friends, and we grab breakfast together and we hang out and like we do activities all day. And he's a marketer as well, and he told me, like, he takes maybe like 7-8 calls in a day, and that's energizing for him. And for me, I'm like, no, man, that's exhausting. So it's sort of, again, like finding what is it that quality connection and energizes you in particular. So there's not one hard and fast rule.
I've been experimenting with what I call artificial dopamine versus real dopamine.
Okay.
Just my terms. I don't really, it's not scientific study yet because it's just me. Real dopamine is when I do things like I open the door for a total stranger going into a public place, or I say hello to someone who's doesn't have a happy appearance on their face, things of this nature. But to me, the fake dopamine is if I'm watching one of my wife's nighttime TV shows. So I'll watch that with her, but yeah, it's kind of fun to watch a show, but it feels different than actually interacting with real people, even if the real people aren't saying anything verbally. And so one of the things that really drew me to following you on your Excuses Connect company and the cool things you're doing, I love your sticker you have. Was it say, come say hi, come say hello, something like that?
Yeah.
That's really great. And so have you seen this with anyone else? Am I just, as James always says, the outlining data point on the curve of life?
Yeah, artificial dopamine and real dopamine. Because I'm not a biologist or whatever field of study this, so I won't be able to comment on that directly. But I think there's some aspect of, like the quality of feeling that we get. I guess the analogy I can draw from is like food. Like junk food feeds us, healthy food also feeds us, but it has a very different long-term effect on our body if we're eating junk food all the time versus, quality, nutritious food. So I sort of relate that to, the junk food is watching whatever your wife's sitcom, which is entertaining and feeds you, but it might not feed you as deeply as having
there's no brain stimulation.
Yeah, as a human interaction with someone. I know there's research that shows that like the concept of a helper's high, like being able to serve someone through like volunteering or helping someone, that's much more long lasting. Even I'll just give a personal story around this. I think around Christmas time 2 years ago, I just thought like I want to buy a gift for someone just to surprise them, right? Because I mean, yes, I could have spent the money on myself and bought whatever products or service, but I'm like, I want to buy something that's might help this person. And so what I ended up buying them, there's this card game called We're Not Really Strangers, and the card game consists of a deck of question cards. So it's meant to be played with people and stimulate this type of conversation. And this was someone I met who I know they're looking for more connection and ways to connect with people. So I thought like this would be a perfect gift for them. I'm going to buy them this game that now they can play with their friends, their family, and spark all these new connections. And so I ordered them this game or like this gift card that then appeared in their email inbox. And they're saying, "Wow, Richard, I didn't expect this at all. Like, thank you so much," and so on. So I mean, tangibly I spent, I don't know, 50, 60 something dollars, but the type of feeling it generated probably far exceeds if I were just to spend that 50, $60 on some new gadget or whatever for myself. And so again, I think there are different types of activities that someone does that sort of differs in the quality of dopamine or feeling you get from it.
So I guess, I mean, I know we're getting towards the end here, but that's actually a very interesting comment, isn't it? It's almost like, I suppose, Mike, it's if a CEO or startup owner, if they're not ready to make the jump of kind of reaching out, then another way to break the cycle is just to give, just to maybe, just to help out at a homeless shelter for an hour or two, like it's, or like whatever it is, or work in the community gardens, or help out at a local church, or sort of whatever it is, because that in itself, although it's not though it's not kind of a straight line to maybe connecting per se, what you're saying and what we all know really is serving others is a great way to improve one's mental health as well, because it's another form of communication, right? It's almost like the pressure's off because I'm just giving my time, and I don't necessarily have to have a front about, hey, whether I'm happy or sad or like anything else. But if I just turn up and like give my time, then it might be a longer route, but it's a very worthwhile route as well, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a huge proponent for volunteering. I volunteered for like 5-6 years regularly when I was in high school until I graduated through an organization in my city that like focused on youth volunteering opportunities. And I made lots of quality friends through that experience because, I already know that the people are there where we have some base alignment of values, where we see the value of giving back to the community. And so we're already connecting on some like-minded values. And then, yeah, actually doing an activity together does take off some of the pressure to have conversation. Because in a, one-on-one face-to-face conversation, if it's silent, that's sort of the awkward silence, like, what do I say next? Or what do I ask? But when you're in a volunteering opportunity, you're sort of all doing an activity together. So it's not, yes, you might be talking here and there, but you're also doing something together. Sort of like sports too. It's like you can connect through sports. It's an activity. You're not necessarily having like these deep conversations, but it's inspiring other things of like teamwork and competition and so on. So again, it sort of goes back to what is the exercise, what is the social activity that works for you.
Mike, what a show.
Oh, excellent. I knew getting Richard back was a good idea.
The time flew by. I can't believe we're ending already.
That's pretty wild. So how do you feel about coming back for part 3, Richard?
Well, I'd be your first ever 3-part guest.
You will not only be our first ever 3rd repeater, but you can even advertise it anywhere you want to.
I mean, if you want to have me on again, I love talking about this topic.
I think
if it's valuable for you and your listeners.
I think it is a really important topic, right? Because mental health is a huge issue in so many societies across the Western world. It's a huge issue here in male mental health is a huge issue here in New Zealand, and I would imagine it is in the States as well. And communication is something which we're not. I mean, I don't. We weren't taught it in my generation at school. I don't. Obviously, education's changed a little bit, but it's still not valued the same as, say, science or geography. Whereas what we're getting to is that it is really important. It's tied up with mental health. It's tied up with family. It's tied up with growing a business. I mean, there's so many things around communication. So yeah, Mike and Richard, yeah, I think there's heaps more to explore.
I can make one more quick comment around this mental health and communication tie, because part of it we have discussed today in terms of like, how do you communicate with yourself? What's your relationship with yourself? But our whole life is communication, because we live in a world with other people. And every time we interact with someone, that's a form of communication, whether online or in person. And so, yes, it's a very worthwhile skill to develop, because you're going to use it for the rest of your life. And one part I didn't quite touch on too, it's like, yes, connections can be positive and, inspire a lot of feelings. But if you have toxic people in your life too, that can cause a lot of stress and like how to actually manage that interpersonal conflict, which again comes to your communication skills. So yeah, definitely, I think there's still lots more we can talk about.
Yes, and I love the negative, toxic, grumpy people that I deal with, because I control how often I talk to those people. As we all can. We can always disengage. We can always find a reason to disengage at that moment and go do something else. The reason I like talking to those kinds of folks is it lets me practice my communication techniques, of which everyone should have a toolkit. And so it almost becomes a diagnostic thing of like, which tool can I use today on this person? Because at that point, they already don't like us. So as you say, it's a low stress endeavor.
I think it does. Yeah, I like what you put there of having a communications toolkit, because yes, there are skillful and less skillful ways of handling certain conflicts, and it does take some education and practice to do that. But also the context of the toxic relationship also matters a lot, because there might be some situations that you can't necessarily separate from, or it's much more difficult, I guess, especially in the context of family, because whole other can of worms. If you have
whole other can of worms. And you got to have situational awareness of when not to engage.
Yeah,
for sure.
Which is what I was just going to mention. Another thing to explore around that subject is, if we make a faux pas, if we make a communication screw up, where do we go sort of from there? So that'd be something which I think we've all been there. Every single person's probably said or typed or texted or emailed or done, and you go afterwards, you go, oh my goodness, that was a screw up. And then so where do we go? So there we go. That's probably a great part 3.
Sure,
that'd be great part 3.
Sounds good.
So we'll have all the links to Richard's company and his LinkedIn and how you get a hold of him down below the video. Post your questions. Looking forward to a 3rd time, and we've got a main topic already. This is excellent. Thanks for being here, Richard. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me again.
Thank you again. Really.